So as I was saying, thank you very much. We work with folks at TAC in several initiatives. When Ouija contacted me, I thought I'd give a presentation about focusing on what we do at SPUR, what a SPUR is, and in some of the initiative that we're trying to do with the city, and then talk a little bit or give a showcase of an example application we're developing in collaboration with the city of San Antonio. So the SPUR Institute is, both our president at UTSA and our pros had made it a point to emphasize the role of UTSA as an urban serving institution. In the College of Engineering and Integrated Design, we have focus on we're trying to think of ways in which we can fulfill that mission through our research and our educational initiatives. And one topic that brought a lot of common interest across the college was the problems that are emerging as a result of population concentrating in large urban centers. So here are a few statistics to frame the problem. 82% of the US population live now in large urban areas, and that percentage is bound to grow. People are moving to bigger and larger cities. And we're all here from Texas and very close to the Texas Triangle, and we have experienced firsthand what happens to cities like Houston, when a major disaster applies. So there's evidently great concern about what might happen in large population centers when there are big disruptions, but there are also concerns about how do we grow in a way that is sustainable, equitable, that puts the people of the city front and center in the way we invest our resources, we do our science, and we allocate our attention. So the main concern that came out of this in our discussions was achieving sustainable growth and resilience. So we're concerned both about major disruptions like hurricanes and so on that might bring, or our winter storm or heat waves, things of that nature that happen over a short temporal scale. But we're also interested in being able to grow sustainably. And I think the two are kind of intertwined. When you don't pay a lot of attention to the way you grow, then that makes the resiliency problem a lot more difficult to address. The other aspect of our approach at SPUR is we're trying to emphasize safety and well-being of people. So we can develop technologies and very powerful and neat technologies, but we think that that's not very meaningful unless they go to address a problem that affects a lot of people. And I think we're seeing in funding agencies like the National Science Foundation, Smart Connected Communities programs, and others, a greater emphasis on developing science that is meaningful to people and there's going to be implemented and used. So this problem is a very challenging problem for a number of reasons. We think of it as a wicked problem, and you may be well familiar with the concept because there's information that is needed to solve the problem is not always there, and sometimes you're balancing between different constituencies. So sometimes your objectives become intertwined and contradictory with one another. When you're dealing with a city, you definitely have a large number of people, and people associate themselves in groups. Each carries their own opinions, their advocacy groups. It's very complex social interaction that takes place. There's the economic aspect of it. So we don't have unlimited resources. And for example, if we wanted to implement fixed rail transportation, public transportation in San Antonio, or a city of the size of San Antonio, that would be a major economic undertaking. And that's just one example of many of the problems that ache our city. So fixing problems in the context of population centers that big is very costly. And lastly, I think from the engineering perspective, something that is very interesting to us is that these problems often involve a number of different networks. Maybe is the way we think of it as engineers, that are interconnected between themselves. And so what happens to one affects the other. And I can think of here in San Antonio, for example, when we had our winter storm a year ago, we had power problems that led to a disruption in the water distribution system. So we had people in the city who didn't have power but had water. We had people who had water but didn't have power, and we had people who'd lost both. But it was very clear that the lack of power affected pumping stations, and that affected the water distribution system. And that triggered failures of other systems downstream, and affected people in major ways. So that's something that also we need to begin to think about, is the fact that these things are tied together. And in difficult circumstances, we need to have robust ideas on how to prioritize, how we manage these systems under reduced capacity. So one of the first things we did with SPUR is we took our Smart and Connected Communities National Science Foundation program as a starting point, and we did this image, checking for words that appeared the most in proposals that had been funding, just to get an idea of what people were thinking in terms of smart and connected communities, and what was convincing to an NSF panel. So you see on the left side in the figure, you have data. So data is a big deal. Social, meaning it's related to society and people. Urban and cities, of course, we're talking about very large population centers. There's concepts like risk, water. So now we're talking about engineered networks and systems and how they're operated. All of those concepts come to the front. And if you start asking yourself, what makes a city smart? The first wave of research, I think, that came in this space was focused on technology. And to some extent, maybe to how to harness data and make it usable for decisions, how to make data supported decisions. But when you start really asking yourself, from the context of the people that live in these communities, what makes a city smart? I think personally, this coming from an engineer, the smart comes from placing an emphasis on solving problems that are most meaningful to people. Technology we can create and build around, but technology is not helpful if it's not targeted towards solving people's problems. So that got us a little bit thinking. And at SPUR, we hosted a couple of workshops. We brought people from the community in San Antonio and nearby, and we began to probe and ask questions about different areas of smart and connected community systems, long-term visions. And that got us thinking about the way we approach our smart city initiatives. In what I've seen over now a couple of years of working closely with the city of San Antonio is that there's a couple of legacy approaches that are very common. I mean, you have a researcher that thinks he or she has identified a very significant problem in the community, and they approach a city department, and they work together to define a scope and develop specific technology to address a problem. So it's kind of the go it alone approach, or sometimes it's a city department that identifies a meaningful problem that they have on hand, and then they approach a researcher that they're worked with in the past. They're comfortable with it. They work on a scope, and then they develop a technology to fix that problem. And to give you an example of some of the problems that I've seen come across from departments, I've seen issues like people picking up waste after their dogs in trails. Dog waste etiquette in trails is one of these problems. Another model that I've seen is very common also in the smart city spaces. You have vendors that approach city departments or the city with the technology that they think is going to do a lot of good and to the citizens. And so then they start to work with a city department from their perspective on a sales pitch from the city, maybe trying to understand how they could use a technology like the one that is being presented to them. And maybe if the whole argument is convincing, then they move into a pilot project implementation with oftentimes a significant investment from the city in trying this technology. So when I think of these approaches, I think of the image on the right, where you have small groups of people and individuals essentially going at it alone in solving problems with a very narrow scope. And what I have seen a need for is a much more comprehensive approach where we develop a set of shared vision and goals. And then maybe when we think of problems and investments, that gives us a basis for prioritizing the significance of those problems and using limited resources in the most effective way. One aspect of this type of approach is that when you accept that going alone is not the best way to do it, then you begin to run into the concept of convergent science, transdisciplinary groups. So you bring together groups of people to solve these problems and to do it in a cooperative way, and people that have different expertise so they can look at problems from different perspectives. So what we're trying to infuse, and we're trying to work with the city and convince the city to do, is to adopt a new approach where we identify and articulate the most meaningful societal problems. So there needs to be a great deal of thinking placed on what are the bigger issues that we're confronting, so that we begin to tackle them first, and we all begin to tackle them with a common goal in mind. If we do that, then we can develop science plans. We can think about what happens in the longer term, which goals we want to achieve. And then we can build convergent teams and convergent research to address those problems, and ultimately test them in an innovation ecosystem that focuses on user-centered design. We want technologies and resources that are designed to address people's problems in an effective way, that work for people. So if we have an innovation system like that, it gives us the chance to try and refine. So we build something and we present it to people, and we can iterate in developing better solutions in a long-term approach. So that's what we're trying to create. One of the entities that we have brought together to do this is the San Antonio R&D League. There are a multitude of partners. You see there's SPUR, USAA, UTSA, there are multiple city departments. And our emphasis when we interact with the R&D League is on first identifying what those city challenges might be, and then we can go around building all the other parts that go around it. Okay, so I'm gonna begin to finish here with this first part, and then I'll show a couple of slides on a project we've done with the city of San Antonio, and then we'll wrap it up. So first of all, the SPUR Institute is built as it originates from the Kleese College of Engineering and Integrated Design, but the idea is that we interact with all colleges across UTSA. So we want people with different expertise, so we can build teams that have the knowledge to address every problem at hand. In many instances, the College of Engineering will take a back seat, and maybe experts from other areas will be at the driving seat, and we're perfectly fine with that. Then, of course, as an institute and other institutes at UTSA, you want to be in connection with the R&D League. That provides a way for us to build things in conjunction with a community of stakeholders. And it gives us the means to interact with other universities like UT Austin and National Lab, and build cooperation groups that can go after problems or develop teams to seek funding from funding agencies like National Science Foundation. The basic concept is that we have a series of systems, the critical infrastructures and social systems. They all generate data. We use data analytics to inform us about the condition of those systems and to measure changes in those systems, to model towards the future and see what the impacts might be. And then we can go back and guide investments towards the future. And that's what it's about. It's about developing cyber infrastructure to support that process of data-informed decisions. A couple of slides to finish my presentation. We are about a specific project portal we're developing with the city of San Antonio. So this goes to the first part of my presentation. I think the most important is to formulate problems in a logical and intelligent way. This is an application that we're building with a database, a web interface, and then a little bit of Python programming. And the idea behind it is that we create a portal for the city where the city can request information about what challenges may be from researchers or city departments. As you look at it here, there are two parts to it. There's a portal that faces the world where people can feed information into this database. There's an administrative portal on the back end for people to go in and get these challenges, evaluate them, maybe consolidate them when some of them are similar, begin to get an idea what different people see as different significant problems. And then if those problems are already formulated and ready for consumption, then this portal would create an announcement of what the challenge might be and assist in the background in the formation of groups of people that might be able to address those problems. So that means there would be a database of researchers. We could use technologies like machine learning or artificial intelligence to mine for information that is relevant to the group, forming the groups, and maybe even expand it in the future to ways in which we bring relevant sources of information to the discussion. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I probably gone about 5 minutes over from what Ouija wanted. But I think that that gives you an idea what from the perspective of UTSA, what we see as a long-term vision, what we're trying to partner with the city and other entities here in San Antonio to achieve, and what we see as the major challenges that we need to address.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Will you be able to share with us the slides later on, so we can maybe post it?
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem. I'll be happy to share with you. Yeah.
Great. So now we can open floor to any questions people may have, and just feel free to unmute and you can ask a question or you can type in them in the chat. Just to begin with, so I think it's very interesting. So is the purpose of the web UI portal is to help the city and the researchers connect, like when they can posting problems, then people may say just take it and contact the city directly.
That's right, Ouija. We in the city of San Antonio has worked with a political science professor from Brown University, David Yoakum. I don't know, you folks are familiar and you work in the smart city space. He was director of the lab at DC and he's now at Brown. And in our interactions with the city and with David, what we're told is that this procurement part is very significant. So if I go back to my first slide, or one of my first slides on this approach, is this link between, or this part of articulating meaningful societal problems is very challenging, and is very challenging for city departments. Sometimes the scope of the problems is very specific to very specific needs. It's difficult to get people to think in the longer term and what is most meaningful, you know, and think in terms of 5 or 10-year terms. Everybody is, especially when politics are involved, they're deeply concerned about the most immediate needs. And so that this platform is squarely meant to address that problem. It's a first step in addressing that problem, bringing together people that have problems in city departments. You know, ideally, eventually you'd have researchers be able to pitch their ideas there too, but then open it up so that when you get to forming the teams, you have a good representation of people with knowledge on that specific space. And mind you, this sort of bypasses step 2, right? Which is a pitch that we're trying to do for the city. Like every department will have strategic plans that would identify what are the longer term problems and so on. And so I personally think I would like to see a greater connection between the problems that we're trying to address in longer term visions. Because at the very end here, you know, we assemble the groups and we do the science. I think we can do really neat stuff. But the question is, we want to be doing really neat stuff for things that matter to people. Sorry, that was a very long answer, but I hope it
no, that's perfect. Yeah, so I think that's a important steps in terms of the collaboration to having the right problem with the right people matching up there. A follow up on that is how many projects actually you currently ongoing or has been facilitating through this with the city?
Okay, so this is just in the development stage. This is a project that we're just finishing. We had, so one of the things that we've been trying to do is we've been working with the city of San Antonio to dedicate a little bit of a budget for city challenges, right? So I know UTSA is going to feed money into this ecosystem. The city has, first year, the city fed a little bit of money into it. I think both USAA and SPUR are also of the same mind. So you start to develop a bit of a pocket of money and so this first round is we're still operating too much under the legacy approach, right? Create a statement for a very narrow specific problem, have a competition. The competition is good because it'll lead to formation of more robust groups, and then tackle the very specific problem. But I see this more as a long-term effort. The city would like to test it and begin to use it, and we're about to do. We're in the process, or we're doing a demo for the city in the very near future. Now, our partners at Brown are using the technology that we developed, I think, in the state of North Carolina, and there's another state in the Northeast that I always forget. So they have a couple of states that are going to actually moving into implementation of this tool for the process of allocating problems and forming groups to address them. So in some ways here in Texas, we're a little bit more cautious in the adoption of the technology. Other places are putting it into operation already.
I see. Yeah. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to your demo. So please include me when you're ready to do the demos someday in the future.
That's great. Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll keep you in mind.
Yeah. Any questions from audience? I think there's a question from the chat. Is how can the problem addressed through the approach be prioritized in the long-term view? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm thinking, okay, so the portal is just a tool to retrieve information, right? To retrieve somebody's idea of what a problem is. And then there is a process, there's a gap, and then there is a process at the end where you formulate the problem in either you form a group based on your database of researchers, or you place an announcement and you put it out in the world for people to tell you that they're interested and they have expertise on this problem. Now, this gap in between, I think, is a process where I made my opinion known to folks in the city that there needs to be a group of people that gather these problems and then begin to put a lot of thought into which ones are the most meaningful, how to prioritize them, and so on. And actually, within the context of the R&D League, there are committees that are tasked with doing that. There's a grants committee, there's a process committee. So I'm quite happy that when we have the R&D League have yearly retreats, and it's a growing enterprise, but we prevail on instilling some of that thought in the city, in the fact that when you have a committee of people that formulate a process, then it's not my opinion on how these problems should be prioritized. It's a group of people that come up with a process for prioritizing problems. And when there is a grants committee in a research interest group, I think that the R&D rig is the term that they're trying to use. There's also going to be a group of people that works in connecting those problems with research solicitation, so that when you go after smart and connected communities, or the Civic Innovation Challenge, or you go for an engineering research center or a science research center, you are not starting from scratch, but you already have put a lot of thought into what the most significant problems are, and you're connecting them to the specific areas that the funding agencies are interested in giving you funding for. So we see many benefits from this. First of all, there's existing program calls from NSF, Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, of many different entities that have their own calls. Frankly, Ouija, I also think that there is, with the allocations that are going around in Congress, there's a significant possibility that cities will receive, a big chunk of resources, and they're going to be scratching their heads on how to use them effectively. And so I think that any thought we can put now towards identifying and prioritizing those problems are going to facilitate, when the resources become available, a plan to do something that is meaningful and impactful for the city. And we're not running to catch up. I think a good example of that, and I know I'm going too long, but the digital divide here in San Antonio is a perfect example I can think of. This has been identified as a significant problem. There are advocacy groups that have actually gone and put together studies. And so they have a keen understanding of the magnitude of the problem, and they even have some plans on how to address it if they were to get resources to do it. And the federal government is lining up to provide some resources for that. And so when they land here, all of a sudden, this is a change, right? With San Antonio is usually last, is the people who have thought least about a problem. They're going to be throughout the country one of the communities that is best organized on how to tackle the digital divide when people, if the resources materialize, to make an investment in that problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. So actually, I think like in terms of the prioritization, especially for smart city, it's actually a moving target, and you have to change over time based on the needs, the actual community needs, and how the technology has been evolved, and to be able to do that. Yeah.
I agree with you, and I think for us researchers, is even the greater challenge is the fact that you're dealing with city council members and politics are involved. So it's not only a moving target because the needs of the community change, but it's also a moving target because they're going to be people or advocacy groups that begin to pressure for a problem to be addressed. And so sometimes you get a lot of attention and interest in the city to do something, and then they drop it and they change 90 degrees. And so that's part of the reason why I've advocated so much with them to forming 5 and 10-year plans, because I think that's the most effective way to use resources.
Okay. Yeah, great. Unfortunately, we'll have to close down the Zoom. It's a little bit over time now. I want to say thank you very much for the wonderful talk, and very interesting, and it's very important problems. And we will posting the videos in our website. So if you, we will let everyone know when the video is up, and please feel free to visiting our website and smartcity.tech.utexas.edu for the past videos and the future talks. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Matamoros, and hope everyone have a wonderful weekend. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.